I now invite the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Eritrea, Ms. Daniela Kravets, to make an introductory statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It's with great honor that I present my oral update on the situation of human rights in Eritrea before this committee. It has been 2 years since Eritrea's peace agreement with Ethiopia and the lifting of UN sanctions on Eritrea. In this period, Eritrea has strengthened its cooperation with neighboring countries. Yet, Eritrea's increased engagement at the regional level has not translated into reforms in the country. In my May 2020 report, I set out 5 benchmarks for progress in human rights and noted the lack of meaningful and substantive improvement in relation to these areas. Since the publication of my report, there have been limited signs of progress. On the issue of political prisoners, there has been no progress. This lack of progress was most recently acknowledged by the European Parliament in a resolution adopted earlier this month, which focused on the case of Dawit Isaak and referred to the pervasive practices of arbitrary detentions and enforced disappearances in Eritrea. Dawit Isaak is a Swedish-Eritrean journalist who has been held for over 19 years in Eritrea, without charge or trial. His case is not an isolated one. This December will mark the 8th year since the arrest of Siham Ali Abdu, an American-Eritrean woman who has been held incommunicado since the age of 15. She was arrested as she tried to flee the country in December 2012 and has not been heard of since. Paulo Seyasu, Isaac Mogos, and Negere Teklemeriam are 3 conscientious objectors who have been held for 26 years. They're part of a group of 52 Jehovah's Witnesses currently in jail. Berhane Abrehe, a former finance minister, has been in prison for over 2 years, following his arrest for publishing a book critical of the government. He is in his 70s and is said to be in poor health. These are examples of the numerous cases of individuals who are currently languishing in Eritrean prisons with no prospect of release. It is difficult to speak of progress in Eritrea while their cases remain unresolved. This September, like every year, the authorities sent busloads of high school students to Sawa military camp despite the COVID-19 restrictions in place in the country. At Sawa, the students will complete their final year of education and be forced to take part in military training. Students should be allowed to return home to avoid the spread of COVID-19. They should also have the choice to decide where they go to school and not be forced into conscription. The authorities should stop using the education system to recruit new conscripts and should ensure that no minors are recruited into the army. Eritrea continues to severely restrict civil liberties. Independent human rights defenders, political opposition groups, and independent journalists cannot work freely in the country. The authorities also continue to impose restriction on religious communities, in particular on unregistered religious congregations, and I have set out this in detail in my report. While I welcome the release by the authorities of over 60 Christians in the months of August and September, I note that many were released on bail, despite the absence of charges against them. Most of them spent over a decade in prison without charge, simply because of their faith. No church leaders were among those released. Alongside these releases, there were new arrests of Christians in August, including of 4 pastors who were taken from their homes by security forces in Asmara. At least 5 Christian women were reportedly arrested in the Kamhara, southeast of Asmara, in September. Additionally, I continue to receive reports of Christians who have died in custody because of poor prison conditions and the lack of basic health services. I urge the Eritrean authorities to immediately and unconditionally release all of those who remain in prison because of their faith or belief. I welcome the release of a large group of Muslim men this past August. While the authorities have not provided official figures, several sources place the number of those released at around 100, although the exact figures are difficult to confirm. Most of them were arrested in March 2018 at the funeral of Haji Musa Mohammed Noor, a Muslim community leader and the former chairman of Al-Daiya Islamic School in Asmara. While this is a positive development, the authorities have yet to ensure full respect for the rights to peaceful assembly and association. As I have indicated in my report, some of those arrested for attending this funeral died in prison. I'm also following up on reports that on 30th August, the authorities carried out mass arrests of men in the village of Kwasien, north of Asmara, allegedly due to a land dispute with a neighboring village. Based on the information received, at least one of these men has since died in custody. The whereabouts of the remaining men are not known. Finally, despite being a member of the Human Rights Council, Eritrea remains unwilling to cooperate with my mandate, and the Eritrean authorities have refused to meet with me over this past year. Eritrea has also not made progress in its cooperation with the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. While the Eritrean authorities have indicated their willingness to implement some of the Universal Periodic Review recommendations, or UPR recommendations, they have yet to show concrete signs of their commitment to improving their human rights record. For these UPR recommendations to translate into positive change in the lives of ordinary Eritreans, the authorities must create an environment conducive for international agencies and donors to operate effectively and freely in the country. In closing, Madam Chair, this is my last week as Special Rapporteur. I wish the new Special Rapporteur, Mohamed Babikar, success in this role. I urge the Eritrean authorities to engage constructively with him and invite him to conduct a country visit. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Special Rapporteur, for your report. And now I open, before I open the floor for questions and comments, I would like to tell you that all delegates wishing to make comments and pose questions to the speaker are invited to use the dedicated speaker request form accessible on the chat board of the Interprefy portal within the next 3 minutes, after which the list will be closed, and I ask you to ask the question first and make the comments after. But before that, I would like to give the floor to the Ambassador of Eritrea. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Madam
Good morning.
President. How are you? Eritrea is committed to the promotion and protection of universal human rights and fundamental freedoms. It reiterates that human rights are indivisible and mutually reinforcing and rejects cherry-picking approach and politicization of human rights in contradiction with the principles of non-selectivity, sovereignty, and constructive cooperation among states. Madam Chair, human rights are the bedrock of social justice, the very principle that underpins Eritrea's development and national building strategy. The full participation of our citizens in the cultural, social, economic, and political development promotes a culture of ethnic and religious tolerance and respect for one another amongst its diverse society. And today, as the world grapples with the deadly COVID pandemic, the accumulated social capital and trust has paid off. The infection rate in Eritrea remains the lowest in our region. Eritrea instituted a strict lockdown strategy to prevent the spread and contain the pandemic. Although the movement of people from one country to another remains banned in the region as a whole, the return of our nationals from Ethiopia, Sudan, Djibouti, and Yemen and through irregular routes continues to date, and over 18,000 have returned so far. Amongst these returnees, 461 cases of COVID infections have been reported, but the good news is that there have been 0 deaths. The original resolution that created the SR's mandate was prompted by political considerations that exploited the regional tensions of the time. Some African states were prodded to table the resolution against Eritrea. For over 8 years, the politicized, unjust, and unfair country-specific approach masked as an African initiative continued. Today, a new reality of peace and cooperation in the Horn of Africa prevails. It's worth mentioning that the latest resolution to renew the mandate did not garner the support of a single African state. The rapporteur continues to ignore any progress reported by various UN agencies in the country and the facts on the ground, the data on maternal health, reduction in infant mortality, increased life expectancy, and the overall efforts to improve the lives of all Eritreans. The realities, the improvements in the lives of our people belie these unfounded and unsubstantiated claims. In fact, what has not changed in the last 8 years is the continued harassment of this young nation. The mandate established for this purpose has not created any dividend. The previous SR served the geopolitical agendas and political ill intentions against the state of Eritrea and worked hand in hand with regime change activists in violation of the UN international principles on human rights and the attendant code of conduct on mandate holders. The current SR, unfortunately, has followed the same track. Despite the advice and the pleas made for her to work with integrity and objectivity, the HRC has been turning a deaf ear to Eritrea's 8-year-long pleas for constructive and objective engagement. Eritrea is engaged in the UPR process and with the Human Rights Treaty body obligations. CEDAW's 8th report discussed with the Fourth Committee, CRC 5th and 6th combined reports are presented now, and planning in the 3rd cycle of the UPR recommendations has been finished, and implementation will start at the beginning of 2021. The confrontational approach, however, continues, negating the ongoing engagement and cooperation, which need not be taken for granted, as Eritrea will only uphold engagement that is dignified and cooperation predicated on partnership. It's high time that this unfair, unjust, and highly politicized exercise is terminated. For improvement of the overall human rights situations of countries, the international community needs continuous engagement from all stakeholders. Eritrea has continued to cooperate with the Office of the Human Rights, High Commissioner for Human Rights, and the international community to further improve and consolidate the human rights of its citizens. On this day, as we celebrate the signing of the UN Charter and recommit ourselves to respect the UN Charter, Eritrea reiterates its commitments and calls on all to respect the rights of the Eritrean people, their right to self-determination and development as enshrined in the UN Charter. Eritrea continues to consolidate its principled position, opposing politicized country-specific resolutions and agendas. We will continue to advocate, support, dignified engagement and cooperation based on partnerships, mutual understanding, and mutual respect. In this context, and as a member of the HRC, we will continue to modestly contribute and propose depoliticization of the international human rights architecture, and in particular the Human Rights Council, and work to ensure the integrity and credibility of the Council, and raise its efficiency and effectiveness. In this regard, Eritrea is committed to serve for the 2nd term at the HRC and shall be seeking re-election. I thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for your statement. And I give the floor now to the United Kingdom, followed by the Russian Federation. United Kingdom, you have 2 minutes. Everyone will be given 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And my question to the Special Rapporteur, you referred to increased engagement with the international community in your report, along with the release of some long-standing religious detainees. Do you see any longer-term shift in the Eritrean position? Madam Chair, United Kingdom thanks the Special Rapporteur for her report and her work over the previous 2 years, but we remain disappointed at Eritrea's lack of cooperation with the Special Rapporteur and call for her successor to be allowed to visit Eritrea in order to fulfill their mandate. Eritrea remains a priority country for the United Kingdom's work on human rights. We welcome the recent release from detention of Muslim and Pentecostal worshippers, but urge Eritrea to release all those still subject to arbitrary detention. We continue to urge progress too with national service reform. The UK welcomes Eritrea's confirmed commitment to the UPR process and looks forward to Eritrea sharing plans for the implementation of accepted recommendations with the UN and international community. The UK offers its support to the implementation of the plan. We encourage Eritrea to make progress in meeting its obligations to the right to liberty and security of the person, the fair and equitable treatment of detainees, the promotion of freedom of religion or belief, and the rights to freedom of expression and of peaceful assembly. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question and comment. I give the floor to the Russian Federation, followed by Greece. Russian Federation, yes.
Madam Chair, we unfortunately must once again point out the fact that the review of the Eritrea is politicized and unlikely to lead to an improvement in the situation of human rights in that country. We are against such an approach. We are convinced that the issues of human rights in individual countries must be considered exclusively in a constructive manner with the full participation of the relevant state. The best forum for this is the Universal Periodic Review in the Human Rights Council. Therefore, we once again stress and welcome Eritrea's commitment to that mechanism and to equitable, mutually respectful, and constructive dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your statement, and I turn to Greece. I invite Greece, followed by the European Union. Greece.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Greece aligns itself with a statement to be delivered on behalf of the European Union. Madam Special Rapporteur, I would like to express Greece's unequivocal support to your mandate and efforts to achieve tangible progress regarding the full respect and enjoyment of human rights in Eritrea. We share your assessment that 2 years after the peace deal achieved with Ethiopia, Eritrea should step up the pace in successfully implementing fundamental human rights reforms. In this regard, it is important to intensify its efforts by actively cooperating with the OHCHR, the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, and other international and regional human rights mechanisms, as well as special procedure mandate holders. As mentioned in your report, we acknowledge the efforts undertaken by the Eritrean authorities to counter gender inequality and discrimination, ban harmful practices like female genital mutilation and child marriage, promote women's participation in society, along with reform of the Eritrean judicial system and the police force. However, we would like to draw your attention to a matter that remains unsettled. In 2017, the Eritrean authorities, without any legal grounds, confiscated the real estate property of the Greek community in Asmara, which houses the premises of the Honorary Consulate of Greece. Such an act constitutes a breach of international law, namely the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the Jeddah Convention on Consular Relations. Therefore, Greece calls on Eritrea to fully respect land and property rights, including those of foreign communities, bring to an end the deprivation of property within its territory, and return the building complex belonging to the Greek community in Asmara to its lawful owners. Thank you.
Thank you very much for Greece. I invite European Union to speak, followed by the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. European Union.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, our questions for the Special Rapporteur. How can the international community best assist Eritrea in improving the human rights situation in the country, including promoting women's rights and addressing gender-based violence? And what is your assessment of Eritrea's apparent engagement in human rights multilateral fora, such as the Human Rights Council and the CEDAW? The EU would like to thank the Special Rapporteur for the presentation and express support for her mandate, while regretting that she has never been granted access to Eritrea. The EU remains particularly worried by reports about ongoing violations of human rights and fundamental freedoms in Eritrea, including arbitrary detentions, inhumane prison conditions, enforced disappearances, cases of torture, and persistent gender-based violence, including sexual violence. We continue to regret the closure of health and school facilities and confiscation of church property, as well as the violation of land and property rights, including those of foreign communities. We remain equally concerned about the indefinite nature of the national service, which remains one of the main drivers of migration from Eritrea, and that the authorities seem unwilling to reform. We urge Eritrea to cooperate fully with the Special Rapporteur, as well as with the thematic Special Procedure mandate holders and the UN Human Rights Mechanism, notably by granting them full and unhindered access to the country. The EU stands ready to facilitate such cooperation. The EU continues to call upon Eritrea to establish an OHCHR office in the country in order to facilitate cooperation with the UN system and to support efforts to ensure compliance with international human rights law. I thank you.
Thank you very much, European Union. I give the floor now to the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, followed by the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With regard to the report submitted on the human rights situation in Eritrea, Venezuela would like to repeat our basic position of rejecting this use of selectivity when it comes to human rights, and the creation of any instrument, report or resolution against specific countries without the agreement of the country. This manipulates information, and it's a violation of the United Nations Charter. We agree with the position of the NAM to reject these kinds of mandates in specific countries, and we agree on the principles of universality and non-selectivity. That's the approach we need to take with regard to human rights. We call for the work of the Human Rights Council to be continued, and the Universal Periodic Review is the main instrument to assess human rights in dialogue with the state concerned. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your statement. I invite the Islamic Republic of Iran, followed by Germany. Iran? Good afternoon.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, we believe that appointing a country-specific rapporteur for Eritrea is counterproductive. Unfortunately, creating such a mandate is a tool to mount extra pressure on independent nations. Targeting countries through naming and shaming, along with the political exploitation of human rights, is contrary to the principles such as objectivity, non-selectiveness, and impartiality of human rights. It should come as no surprise that these mandates are unable to yield a better outcome. We believe that the expansion of human rights cooperation through the exchange of experiences, provisions of technical assistance, and capacity building can accomplish plenty to facilitate the promotion and protection of human rights all around the world. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much for the distinguished representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran. I turn to Germany, followed by Switzerland. Germany.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Germany aligns itself with the EU statement. We thank the Special Rapporteur for her report. It is quite unmistakably, and I quote from the report, the Special Rapporteur has seen no evidence of a tangible improvement in the human rights situation, and that she remains deeply concerned by widespread human rights violations, unquote. These findings are deeply concerning, especially given the potential that the regional developments have had. Equally concerning is the persistent lack of the Eritrean government to engage or simply talk to the Special Rapporteur. Madam Special Rapporteur, we explicitly want to thank you for your work in the past years. Your tireless investigations, despite all obstacles, have always been insightful, transparent, and professional. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Germany. I turn now to Switzerland, followed by Belarus. Switzerland, are you with us? Switzerland? Yes, the floor is yours.
Thank Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Special Rapporteur, I'd like to start with our question. What lessons have you learnt from your term? What are your recommendations for the new Special Rapporteur to be able to implement the mandate? Madam Chair, Switzerland would like to thank the Special Rapporteur for her latest report and for the important work during her term. We regret the fact that there was no possibility for the Special Rapporteur to visit Eritrea. Switzerland would urge the Eritrean government to take necessary measures to improve the human rights situation in the country. In particular, the implementation of the Special Rapporteur's recommendations in conjunction with the 5 indicators would enable the government to undertake necessary reforms. There is an urgent need to implement these recommendations. Switzerland once again would ask the Eritrean government to strengthen its cooperation with the Human Rights Council mechanisms and with the High Commissioner for Human Rights. Switzerland encourages it to authorize a visit of the Special Rapporteur and to facilitate the work of humanitarian organizations and other international partners. Switzerland, along these lines, welcomes the cooperation with the government and the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women and its efforts to implement CEDAW. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I invite Belarus, followed by Cameroon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As part of our dialogue with the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Eritrea, Belarus once again would like to underscore that it is against the practice of a selective establishment of special country procedures. We are concerned about the conclusions of these mechanisms. Often they warp the real situation in human rights in the country, and the recommendations are unrealistic in terms of their practical implementation. Belarus agrees that all states are bound to promote and protect human rights and fundamental freedoms and uphold the obligations that they undertook under different international documents. We are convinced that through an equal and respectful dialogue with the governments, it is possible to achieve the overall goal of promoting and protecting human rights and ensuring sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I invite the Ambassador of Cameroon to speak on behalf of the group of the African states, followed by Burundi. Your Excellency.
Thank you. Another statement on behalf of the African group. 1. The group strongly believes in the universality, objectivity, and non-selectivity in addressing human rights issues everywhere, and firmly also oppose politicization and double standards. The politicization of human rights has only proven counterproductive and confrontational, failing to achieve a meaningful outcome in protecting and promoting human rights. 2. The group reaffirms its commitment to enhancing constructive international cooperation on the promotion and protection of human rights with full respect to national sovereignty, human dignity, and mutual respect. In this regard, UPR is and remains the sole universally agreed on mechanism to address the human rights situation of every member state in an equal and constructive manner. Finally, the group welcomes the various initiatives that the government of Eritrea continue to take to further improve the human rights of its citizens, including the implementation of the UPR. We also welcome the positive development towards peace and regional cooperation in the Horn of Africa region, which for continued positive development in this regard. The international community should recognize this development and support the government in this endeavor. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Excellency. I give the floor to Burundi, followed by China.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
La délégation a pris note du rapport de la
Delegation
rapporteure
has taken
spéciale sur
note
la
of the
situation
report
des
of the
droits de
Special
l'homme en
Rapporteur
Érythrée
on the situation of human
et
rights in
ne cesse de
Eritrea.
redire
We
sa
would like to
position
reiterate
de
that
s'opposer fermement
we
contre
are
de tels
firmly
mandats politiquement
against
motivés.
this politically
Le
motivated
Burundi est
report.
convaincu
Burundi
que le
is
dialogue, la
convinced
coopération,
that
des mécanismes
dialogue,
consensuels,
cooperation and
comme l'examen
consensus-based
périodique
mechanisms,
universel,
for example
constituent
the
la voie
UPR,
appropriée pour
are the
examiner
best
les
ways
questions des droits de l'homme.
for examining human
Malheureusement, la
rights matters.
sélectivité, le deux poids, deux mesures,
The
en raison
selective
des
nature
motivations
of this
politiques,
and
sont en
double
train
standards
de
because of
faire
political
dévier le
reasons
Conseil des droits de l'homme
seem to be
des objectifs
deviating the Human Rights
lui
Council
assignés par
from
l'Assemblée
its
générale lors de sa
aim that
création.
was conferred upon it by
Madame
the
la
General Assembly when
Présidente,
it was
le
set up.
Burundi se
Madam,
félicite de la
Burundi
coopération de l'Érythrée
welcomes
avec le Conseil
Eritrea's
des droits de l'homme,
cooperation with the Human Rights
notamment
Council,
par
in
sa
particular
participation
because
au
of
troisième
its
cycle de
participation in
l'examen
the
périodique
third
universel.
round of the
Nous
UPR.
saluons également les
We
efforts
also
déployés par
welcome
l'Érythrée
efforts made
pour
by
normaliser ses
Eritrea
relations
to
avec les
normalize
États
these
voisins.
relations with
Je vous
neighboring
remercie, Madame la
countries.
Présidente.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I give the floor now to China, followed by Sudan.
Madam Chair, China appreciates Eritrea's efforts to promote economic and social development, eradicate poverty, improve people's living standards, safeguard their rights to education and health, and protect the rights of vulnerable groups such as women, children, and persons with disabilities. China is concerned that the report submitted by the former rapporteur uses unconfirmed information and is one-sided. China has always advocated that all countries handle their differences in the field of human rights through dialogue and cooperation, noting that Eritrea and other countries in the region are opposed to keeping the position of the special rapporteur. We call on the countries concerned to abandon politicization, listen carefully to the views of the states concerned and countries in the region, and refrain from imposing extreme mechanisms without their consent, because that will not help dialogue and cooperation, nor serve the promotion and protection of human rights. Thank you, Madam.
And finally, I give the floor to Sudan. Sudan? Sudan, are you here with us? Yes. Yes, okay. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing us the opportunity. Sudan appreciates the Eritrean government's effort to promote and protect human rights, and we emphasize our respect for the role of the Commissioner for Human Rights through the different mechanisms to support member states to advance human rights. Sudan reminds the need to be guided by impartiality, objectivity, and non-selectivity, and non-politicization, and to adopt a constructive dialogue approach. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And now I give the floor to the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Eritrea, Ms. Daniela Kravets, to respond to the comments and questions.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm going to start by addressing the comments made by the Ambassador of Eritrea. I welcome her presence in this session. I note that she referred to the Eritrea's view that this is a politicized and unfair and unjust mandate. I have in the past and will again here reiterate the fact that I have carried out this mandate in an unbiased manner. I have no political agenda whatsoever. I'm originally from Chile. I have no interest in a specific political outcome in the region and have simply used this platform to raise issues of importance to the attention of the Human Rights Council and to this committee today. The ambassador mentioned that the mandate has so far not yielded any dividends in the 8 years of existence. That is largely due to the fact that Eritrea has flatly refused to cooperate with the previous mandate holder and with myself, despite the numerous attempts both of us have made over the years to reach out to the authorities and engage in constructive dialogue. And that is quite disappointing. I find disappointing the lack of reference in the ambassador's remarks to the situation of political prisoners, which I raised today and I have raised in previous presentations before the Human Rights Council. The Eritrean authorities remain completely silent on this issue, despite the repeated appeals by different international actors for political prisoners to be released. On the question by the UK, whether the increased engagement by Eritrea in the international scene and the recent releases we've seen of members of both the Christian and Muslim communities are a reflection of long-term shift in human rights. My appreciation of the situation now is that no, we're not really seeing a long-term shift. I think it's only when we see the authorities being willing to address the situation of political prisoners, show more willingness to reforming the national service, show more openness towards the religious practice in general, but in particular unregistered religious communities. And just generally when we start seeing political opposition groups being able to operate, journalists being able to conduct their activities freely, human rights defenders being able to work, it's only then that I think we can start speaking about long-term shift. But at the moment, we are not seeing that. Greece referred to the confiscation of property in 2017, and I am aware of that, that situation has not been resolved. As I had mentioned in my report, last year, we also saw the confiscation of property of the Catholic Church, in particular the health facilities and some schools. And this confiscation of property belonging both to institutions, religious groups, and to foreign communities, it has been a constant feature over the last years. And unfortunately, those who have seen their property confiscated have no legal recourse. There's no way for them to make an appeal other than through political means for the authorities to return that property or provide compensation of some kind. In relation to the question by the EU representative of how the international community can best assist Eritrea in developing its human rights agenda, I note that in my report, I set out different forms of technical assistance that international donors and international agencies could provide to Eritrea. I'm not going to repeat all of them now, but there are some that are particularly important given the current economic situation in the country. One of them being technical assistance on carrying out training on the labor market reform, and just generally technical assistance to promote income-generating activities and skills training, especially for the youth, because we have been seeing huge departures of youth from the country in recent years. At the moment, because of COVID, those departures have reduced in numbers, but I'm pretty sure that as soon as the COVID measures are lifted, that situation will continue. So I think that there is a need to promote more opportunities for the youth in country. Another area where technical assistance is needed is on the issue of religious rights. And in particular, something I noted in my report is the need for support for the government in providing viable options for religious communities that currently do not have a recognized status, and in order for them to be able to register and practice their faith without discrimination. There are a number of recommendations that linked up with SDG 5 on gender equality, which I noted in my report. Some of them concern the situation of female prisoners. For example, the need for technical assistance in creating an independent body to monitor the conditions of detention of female detainees, and just generally the need for technical assistance to improve access to justice for women, for example, by creating a system of free legal aid for women. Additionally, there's a need to improve access to land for women and also promote economic activities by women, for example, increase their participation in small and medium enterprises. And in the legal aspects, I noted in my report a number of areas where technical assistance is needed. For example, in enacting adequate legislation and a comprehensive policy to curb trafficking in persons, which particularly in the case of Eritrea tends to target women and girls, and also technical assistance in ratifying and implementing into domestic law the provisions of what is known as the Maputo Protocol, the protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, on the rights of women in Africa. And additionally, assistance in harmonizing national law with the CEDAW Convention, and also support in acceding to the optional protocols. So there are a number of areas where technical assistance could support Eritrea in developing its human rights agenda. The EU representative also asked what are my views on the participation or the increased participation of Eritrea in multilateral fora such as the Human Rights Council or CEDAW. As I noted in my remarks, and I have in the past as well stated this, despite being a member of the Human Rights Council now for 2 years, Eritrea has yet to cooperate with my mandate. Although as part of its obligations as a member of the Human Rights Council is the obligation to cooperate effectively with special procedures, there has yet to be a country visit by a special procedure, not only country-specific one, but other thematic special procedures as well. So, and Eritrea has yet to issue standing invitations for thematic special procedures. And on the CEDAW, on its participation in CEDAW, many of the recommendations I made in relation to benchmark 4, which refers to gender equality and the rights of women, are also picked up in the recommendations the CEDAW committee has made to Eritrea, and we have yet to see the practical implementation of those recommendations. Moving on to the remarks by the representative from Switzerland of what lessons I have learned from these 2 years as Special Rapporteur, I think the most important lesson is that this mandate remains very important and relevant, in particular for the victims, in particular for the relatives of those who are currently in jail and who do not have other avenues or other platforms to bring the plight of their loved ones to the attention of the international community. And I also think that because the human rights situation in Eritrea at the moment requires a considerable investment in order to move forward, I think it's important for the attention of the international community to remain focused on Eritrea, and this mandate is one of the avenues for that to take place. Something I stated in my report, and I have stated in the past as well, is that I feel there's a greater need for there to be engagement from the African group and from African human rights bodies and mechanisms concerning the situation of human rights in Eritrea. And I really welcome the decision by the President of the Human Rights Council to select Mohamed Babikar, who said Sudanese, to replace me. I think it's very important for this mandate to be carried forward by someone who does not only know the region very well, but is from the region. I believe those were all the questions, Madam Chair. So with that, I close. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Daniela Kravets, for your report, for answering the questions, for being with us. Thank you very much, and good afternoon.
Good afternoon.